Imagine you open your eyes and the world is sick. Not a person, not a city. The entire world. An invisible enemy travels on ships, on clothes, in the breath of your loved ones, and wipes 1 out of every 3 people you know off the map. Today we travel to 1348, the apocalypse of the Black Death. But we won't just tell you the story. We'll give you the keys to why your instincts and your modern knowledge would have been useless, and why survival was a matter of pure, terrifying luck. It all began in the port of Messina, Sicily, in October 1347. 12 Genoese merchant galleys arriving from the Black Sea reached the port. The city, a prosperous center of trade, eagerly awaited the silks and spices of the East. Instead, they received an indescribable horror. Upon boarding the ships, the citizens found a ghostly scene. Most of the sailors lay dead over their oars, and the few who remained alive were delirious specters, with soaring fevers and covered in strange black boils in their groins and armpits that oozed blood and pus. Terrified, the magistrates ordered the death fleet to set sail immediately. But it was too late. The passenger had already disembarked. They didn't know it, but the end of their world had just arrived on a merchant ship. Medieval Europe was the perfect breeding ground for a pandemic, a powder keg waiting for a spark. Your modern knowledge is worthless here. You were doomed before you even began. First, the cities, a labyrinth of narrow, unpaved streets filled with garbage, food scraps, and human and animal excrement. There is no sewage system. Butchers throw entrails into the street. People live crammed into wooden houses, sharing rooms with their animals and, even worse, with rats. The black rat is the constant companion of urban life, so common that no one pays it any attention. Second, medical ignorance. The most learned doctors of the time, trained in the best universities, based all their science on Galen's theory of the 4 humors. They believed disease was an imbalance between blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Their main suspect was the theory of miasma, a poisoned, corrupt air, perhaps caused by a distant earthquake or a misalignment of the planets. They were completely blind to the true cause. And third, the globalized world. The same trade routes that brought prosperity to Europe now served as highways for the plague. From the trading posts of Crimea, the disease traveled to Constantinople, the heart of world trade. From there, Genoese and Venetian ships spread it to every port in the Mediterranean. It was impossible to contain. The real culprit was a microscopic killer, an enemy completely invisible to the medieval world, the bacterium Yersinia pestis. This is where your modern knowledge gives you a terrifying insight. Imagine we can follow its journey. The bacterium lives and reproduces in the gut of a flea. The flea bites a black rat and transmits the disease. The rat, now infected, travels as a stowaway on a merchant ship. At the next port, the rat dies and its hungry fleas search for a new host. That new host is you. The flea bites you, regurgitating the bacteria into your bloodstream. Within days, Yersinia pestis multiplies exponentially and attacks your lymphatic system. Your lymph nodes in the groin, armpits, or neck swell into painful black buboes the size of an egg. This is the bubonic plague. If the bacteria reach your lungs, you can transmit it through the air by coughing. This is the pneumonic plague, almost 100% fatal. And if it enters your bloodstream directly, it causes septicemic plague, which turns your skin black and kills you in hours. While medieval doctors burned incense to purify the air, or prescribed useless bloodlettings, the real killer was waging a war inside your own veins. Your fate was sealed. With the enemy unleashed, civilization crumbled. Let's use the accounts of the writer Boccaccio in Florence to paint a picture of the collapse. Imagine you are a father. Your young son starts with a fever, and the next day a bubo appears on his neck. You love him, but panic is stronger. The survival instinct screams at you to flee. You do the unthinkable. You abandon your own child to try to save yourself. This was the reality. Family and social bonds were broken. Doctors refused to visit the sick. Priests would not give the last rites, and grave diggers could not keep up. Fear needed a face. Unable to blame an invisible bacterium, people blamed their neighbors. Brutal waves of violence were unleashed against marginalized communities. Thousands of Jews were accused of poisoning the wells, and massive pogroms wiped out entire communities in France and Germany. Terror brought out the worst in humanity. The dead were thrown into the streets, and at night, carts roamed the city crying, "Bring out your dead." The bodies were piled in mass graves like lasagna, a layer of bodies, a layer of earth. In the midst of this chaos, the iconic figure of the plague doctor appears. With his bird-beak mask, which they filled with aromatic herbs to protect against the bad air, and his long leather coat, he looks like a nightmarish creature. But his function was not to cure because they had no cure. His real job was to count the dead, witness wills, and often perform rudimentary autopsies. Their remedies were desperate, bloodletting with leeches, lancing the bugles to release the poison, or applying strange poultices. They were not heroes, they were the chroniclers of the apocalypse. When the last echo of the plague faded years later, the world that remained was unrecognizable. Half the population of Europe was dead. But this unprecedented tragedy brought entirely unexpected consequences. First, there was a profound psychological shift. Blind faith in institutions was shattered. The church, which had been unable to stop the plague with its prayers, lost much of its authority. People began to question the old order, and art became obsessed with death, giving rise to the danse macabre style, where skeletons dance with kings and popes, reminding them that death makes us all equal. At the same time, this crisis of faith was accompanied by an economic revolution. With half the labor force gone, the value of work skyrocketed. For the first time in centuries, surviving peasants and artisans had bargaining power. They demanded and received higher wages and more freedom. The rigid feudal system, based on serfdom, collapsed. This new wealth and social mobility in the lower classes created a new urban middle class that, with its money and its new skeptical mindset, would become the engine and patron of the greatest cultural flourishing in history, the Renaissance. Paradoxically, the apocalypse of the Black Death was the fertilizer upon which the modern world grew. If this journey into the heart of the most devastating pandemic in history has impacted you, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our future investigations. And now I ask you, which of the medieval remedies for the plague do you find the most absurd and desperate? The miasma theory, the flagellants, or another one you know of? Let us know in the comments.